My family called me heartless when I reported my sister's husband to the bank. They said Eric had spent months helping our 74-year-old mother while she recovered from surgery, and I was destroying my sister's marriage over money. Then the fraud investigator turned his monitor toward me and pointed to one transaction. It had been authorized at 11:42 on the morning Mom had surgery. At 11:42, my mother was unconscious in an operating room. That was the moment everyone's excuses stopped making sense. My name is Claire, and my mother, Linda, had always been fiercely independent. Even after my father died, she refused to let my sister Rachel or me take over her life. She paid her own bills, drove herself everywhere, and kept every bank statement in a folder beside her desk. Then last year, severe arthritis finally forced her to have hip surgery. Her doctor warned us that recovery could take months, so Rachel and I agreed to divide the responsibilities. I handled appointments, physical therapy, groceries, and medication. Rachel lived farther away, but her husband Eric worked from home and offered to help Mom with her online bills. At the time, it sounded reasonable. Eric was the kind of person everyone trusted quickly. He remembered birthdays, fixed things without being asked, and always knew how to make himself useful. When Mom struggled to log into her utility account after surgery, Eric created a new password for her. When an insurance payment was due, he handled it. When she worried about missing deadlines, he told her, "Linda, you focus on getting better. I'll make sure nothing gets behind." Mom was grateful, so was I. For the first 2 months, nothing seemed unusual. Then I started noticing small things. Mom asked me why her checking balance seemed lower than she expected. I assumed medical expenses were adding up. She had copays, prescriptions, physical therapy, and several home modifications. I told her we could sit down together and review everything when she felt stronger. A week later, she called me sounding embarrassed. "Claire, did I pay the property tax twice?" I checked the account from her laptop. The tax payment was there, but there were also several transactions I didn't recognize. None of them were huge. $600, $950, $1,200. A payment to an equipment supplier. Another to a credit company I had never heard of. I asked Mom whether she recognized them. She shook her head. I called Rachel first, because I genuinely believed there had to be an explanation. She immediately became defensive. "Eric has been handling everything for Mom. Maybe those are medical expenses." "They're not." "Then ask him." I did. Eric barely hesitated. He said some payments had been routed through different processors because Mom's bank card kept declining online. He told me he had kept records and would send them later. He never did. The next morning, I called the bank and asked Mom to sit beside me while we spoke to them. Because the transactions weren't mine, they needed her authorization. The representative reviewed the account and suddenly became much more serious. She asked Mom whether she had connected her checking account to a digital wallet and a business payment profile. Mom looked at me. "What business?" That question triggered the fraud department. 2 days later, Mom and I sat inside a small office at the bank while an investigator named Daniel reviewed 6 months of activity. He explained that the suspicious payments weren't random. Someone had linked Mom's account to a separate payment profile and had been using it to cover expenses associated with a small home renovation company. Eric owned a home renovation company. The investigator printed the transactions. Truck payment, equipment rental, building supplier, business credit card, fuel account, insurance premium. The total was $38,420. Mom stared at the number for so long that I finally touched her hand. She whispered, "I gave him permission to pay my electric bill." That was all. When Rachel found out I had asked the bank to freeze everything, she exploded. Within an hour, our family group chat was full of messages. Rachel said Eric had sacrificed months helping Mom and I was treating him like a criminal. One aunt wrote that family sometimes borrowed money from each other and handled it privately. My uncle told me filing a formal fraud report would destroy Rachel's marriage. Then Rachel sent the message that made me stop feeling guilty. Mom would have helped us anyway, you know that. I replied, then why didn't he ask her? Nobody answered. Eric finally came to Mom's house that evening with Rachel. He brought a folder and behaved as though we were having a misunderstanding about accounting. He admitted using Mom's account, but he called the money temporary loans. His business had lost 2 major contracts. Several customers were late paying him. He said he had expected to replace everything before Mom noticed. According to him, he wasn't stealing because he fully intended to pay it back. Mom asked, "When did I agree to lend you $38,000? Eric looked at Rachel instead of answering. Rachel said, "Mom, he was desperate." Mom's voice changed. So desperate people are allowed to take whatever they want. Eric opened the folder and showed us a handwritten list of amounts he claimed he planned to repay. It looked organized. That was almost worse. This had not been one panicked decision. He had tracked every dollar while hiding where it came from. Still, Rachel kept defending him. Then Daniel from the bank called me. He had finished reviewing the access logs and found something important. One of the larger payments, $4,800 to a building supplier, had been authorized from Mom's account on the morning of her operation. I asked for the exact time. 11:42 a.m. I remembered that morning perfectly. I had been sitting in the surgical waiting room while Rachel went downstairs for coffee. Eric had been there too, working on his laptop. At 11:42, Mom was under anesthesia. The following afternoon, our family gathered at Mom's house. I did not want another screaming match, so I placed the bank documents on the dining table and waited until everyone sat down. Rachel started first. She said I was humiliating her husband and turning a financial mistake into a family crisis. I slid the transaction record toward her. Ask Eric what Mom was doing at 11:42 on March 17th. Eric's expression changed before Rachel even looked at the page. She read the date. Then she looked at Mom. Mom said quietly, "I was in surgery." Nobody spoke. I turned to Eric. "You told us she approved these payments." He said Mom had given him general permission to manage bills. "To manage her bills," I said, "not yours." Rachel stared at her husband. For the first time, she didn't defend him. The bank investigation continued. Eric's access to Mom's accounts was removed permanently. Mom changed every password, replaced her cards, and added extra security that required her direct approval for large transactions. On the advice of the bank and an attorney, she filed the necessary reports herself. I didn't make that decision for her. That mattered to me. This was her money, her trust, and ultimately her choice. Rachel barely spoke to me for several weeks. Then one evening she called. She sounded exhausted. She had discovered Eric's business was in worse condition than he had admitted. Mom's money had not saved it. It had only delayed the collapse. Rachel said, "I thought you were trying to punish him." I told her I was trying to stop him. There was a long silence. Then she said, "I know that now." Mom eventually recovered most of the disputed money through a combination of bank reversals, repayment arrangements, and funds Eric was required to return. She did not recover her trust as easily. Months later, Mom and I were sitting on her porch after physical therapy when she said something I still think about. I kept telling myself he was helping me because I wanted to believe needing help didn't make me vulnerable. I told her needing help had never been the problem. The problem was someone deciding that trust was permission. My family called me heartless for reporting my sister's husband, but one transaction changed everything. He claimed Mom had approved the money, yet he moved thousands of dollars while she was unconscious on an operating table. Sometimes the hardest part of protecting someone you love is being willing to look cruel to the people benefiting from your silence. If you discovered a family member had been secretly taking money from an elderly parent, would you confront them privately first or go straight to the bank? Tell me in the comments, and subscribe to Real Stories of Women for more original family stories.